Chapter 545, Order. Combat Nuns. Amidst Lumien's surprise, he felt a sudden sense of order return to society. In any country on the northern continent, wild beyonders were unwelcome. They faced control and even apprehension. This wasn't like colonies such as Port Farim, where renowned adventurers could freely roam the streets and boast about their experiences without the concern of official beyonders knocking on their doors. "Boss, is there any danger?" Lugano nervously inquired, his perpetual fear evident as a wild beyonder. Lumien chuckled, responding confidently, "That depends on their attitude." The implication was that the nuns were the ones facing danger. Lumien teased, "Aren't you excited about the combat nuns? Shouldn't you be thrilled that they're here?" Imagination isn't the same as reality. Seeing his boss showing no intention of teleporting away with him, Lugano nervously descended and extended an invitation to the combat nuns. The leader was the same one Lumien had encountered before. Most of her naturally curly, thick black hair was neatly tucked into a black hat with white patterns. Her bright and lively light blue eyes, along with her thick eyebrows, bestowed upon her a unique and captivating charm. The woman in leather armor gazed at Lumien and inquired gently, "Are you the adventurer Louis Barry?" Lumien nodded. "Who might you be?" The strikingly beautiful combat nun replied with a smile, "I'm Sister Nolia of the Fertility Order, in charge of a combat team. Praise the earth, praise the mother of all things." Nolia raised her hands to the sky, her feet slightly apart. Observing that Nolia and the other combat nuns of the Fertility Order were not as judgmental as he expected, not viewing wild beyonders as inherently evil creatures, Lumien smiled. "Madame, what brings you here?" Nolia smiled and explained, "You're a great adventurer who hunted Demon Warlock. If we hadn't known you were in Port Santa, we might not have bothered. However, now that we are aware, we must come and speak with you, reminding you to abide by the corresponding order." "What order?" Lumien inquired, anticipating the answer while holding the golden straw hat. The demeanor of these combat nuns made him wonder if they were official beyonders. They didn't directly arrest him, nor did they use stern warnings. Is this the distinction between the Church of Earth Mother and other churches, emphasizing motherhood and respecting life? Nolia's red lips formed a beautiful smile as she spoke. "In other cities, we would issue a direct warning, bringing you under our control. If you dare to resist, you could be apprehended or even eliminated. However, this is Port Santa, and many sea merchants here have a genuine need to resist pirates and protect their goods. We lack the manpower to safeguard them all, so we've tacitly agreed to allow them to hire beyonder bodyguards. Monsieur Louis Barry, you are free to roam Port Santa, but you must adhere to 3 rules. Firstly, you cannot venture inland without our permission. To reach other cities, you need our approval. Secondly, you cannot perform any rituals in Port Santa, consume potions for advancement, or engage in mysticism experiments. Thirdly, you must refrain from using your abilities to cause chaos or catastrophe. Of course, if you return to Port Santa in the future, you'll need to register with us first. It's a reasonable request, and coming from the ruling church, it's not excessive at all. It's even simpler and easier than obtaining a firearm permit in Port Farim or other places. Of course, not applying for identification in Port Farim isn't a big deal. No one will report it, and there won't be any issues if you don't directly encounter the officials." Lumien nodded gently and replied, "Sure thing." At this moment, Lumien's thoughts raced, and he couldn't help but chuckle. "But Port Santa isn't entirely safe. I encountered a monster last night." He briefly recounted how the little monster had disguised itself as a devil to intimidate him. While he didn't conceal that he had accepted George's commission, he refrained from specifying the details. Nolia listened attentively and responded without surprise, "We'll handle it. Try not to get involved in the Fisheries Guild's matters in the future. Their internal issues will be resolved internally." Does this mean that the Earth Mother Church refrains from interfering with the internal strife of the Fisheries Guild, allowing them complete autonomy? Lumien smiled and said, "I'll do my best to avoid participation, but I'll reserve the right to defend myself and counterattack." Nolia didn't offer any further comments. Her smile faded as she led the combat nuns to the door. In just 2 or 3 steps, she smoothly drew a straight sword from her back, half-turned and slashed at Lumion. The series of movements flowed seamlessly, occurring in the blink of an eye. Lumion stared at the sword beam, neither dodging nor raising his hand to block. With a swoosh, the straight sword grazed the tip of his nose and pointed to the ground. Nolia smiled radiantly and nodded in satisfaction. As expected of a great adventurer, your foresight, judgment, and courage are exceptional. She then turned around and addressed the combat nuns who followed her. This is a true man. Those who only know how to flaunt their muscles and swing their swords can only be called male beasts. As they spoke, the combat nuns exited Lumion's rented suite. Lumion raised his right hand and stroked his chin, feeling a strange sensation. The sight of women openly scrutinizing men made him uncomfortable. After watching Nolia and the nuns leave, Lugano lowered his voice and asked, "Boss, did a little monster really come to warn you last night?" "That's right. If you were the one who completed Georgia's commission, it might not be just a warning." Lumion put on the golden straw hat and casually remarked as he walked towards the door, "We have an obligation to remind our employer that someone is secretly spying on their family." Lugano was taken aback for a moment before understanding Lumion's intentions. He grabbed Ludwig and followed closely behind. 21 St. Lana Street, in the activity room of a suite on the 5th floor. Lumion encountered Georgia once again. Dressed in a vibrant dress adorned with intricate patterns, the lady glanced at the boy, whose appetite exceeded her imagination, before turning her gaze to the adventurer, Louis Barry. "What brings you here?" Lugano translated professionally. "Last night, a monster came to intimidate me, but I chased it away." Lumion briefly recounted the monster's appearance and behavior. Upon hearing Lugano's account, Georgia displayed no obvious surprise. After a few seconds of contemplation, she said, "Wait a moment." Leaving the maid and valet behind, she disappeared into an inner room. After a few minutes, she reappeared, arm in arm with a man. The man seemed to be in his 40s, tall and gaunt, his eyes a nearly translucent blue. His grayish-black, slightly curly hair cascaded over his shoulders like an artist's. His appearance couldn't be described as particularly good or bad, yet he possessed an unforgettable quality. "This is my husband, Rubio Paco," Georgia introduced. "The shareholder of the Fisheries Company and a committee member of the Fisheries Guild." Lumion had gathered information about the Paco family through Lugano over the past 2 days. Rubio's father had initially been a prosperous fisherman who shared a boat with others. After marrying Martha, who had once been a maiden of the sea, he gradually established himself. Not only did he manage the Fisheries Company for a time, but he also ascended to become a committee member of the oldest local guild, the Fisheries Guild. Shortly after the sea prayer ritual last year, the old gentleman passed away. With strong support from matriarch Marta, Rubio inherited his father's status and became the youngest committee member of the Fisheries Guild. However, he no longer held a specific position at Port Santa Fisheries Company. He only held onto the shareholders' voting rights and dividends. This middle-aged man had once been rebellious. He was expected to comply with his parents' arrangements and marry a maiden of the sea. However, he remained single until his early 30s and then married Georgia, the daughter of a textile merchant. If it were any other prominent family, the matriarch would have surely intervened and perhaps even banished Rubio. Yet, Martha indulged him and eventually chose to compromise. Before Lugano could commence with the translation, Rubio spoke in less fluent Intijan. "We can communicate directly. When I was young, I often took a boat out to sea and visited places like Port Farim. Monsieur Rubio, I don't think there's a need for communication, and I don't intend to find out why the monster came looking for me. I'm just here to inform you about this." Lumion glanced at the puzzled Georgia and suspected that Rubio had switched to Intijan not out of politeness, but to keep his wife in the dark about something. Rubio nodded gently and said, "I understand your concerns. I merely wish to entrust you with another mission." "What mission?" Lumion asked with a smile. Rubio calmly replied, "My mother, Martha, hails from Milo village. Recently, she wishes to return and meet the current governor of the sea to request his permission to seek treatment at the Church of Earth Mother. Yes, my mother hasn't been in good health recently. She can't get out of bed. Martha is still alive. Lumion was slightly surprised. Experienced as he was, he deduced that the monster might have been transformed by Martha, based on the absence of the matriarch, the Paco family's reluctance to expose the humanoid lizard, and the fact that she was once a maiden of the sea. The sea prayer ritual wasn't just an honor for the maidens of the sea. Perhaps there was also hidden corruption that might erupt at some point in time. But now, from what Rubio had said, Martha was still alive. Previously, she had only been seriously ill. Where did that humanoid lizard come from? Lumion suppressed his puzzlement and asked in confusion, "Why does Madame Martha need the governor of the sea's permission to seek treatment?" Rubio's expression shifted, a mix of disgust and resistance evident in his words. All maidens of the sea have to follow the orders of the governor of the sea when dealing with church-related matters. Failing to do so would be blasphemous to the sea prayer ritual.